is a Trojan
not.
horse.
The history of military as well as
Miserable
political...
Trojan horse.
The history of military as well as political history is strewn with the bodies of the slain because they plan for the battle beyond the one right in front of them, and funnily enough they end up losing the one in front of them. You know, in Scotland, Scottish nationalists voted for devolution. They don't believe in devolution, they want independence.
Sure, but what's the point about this could produce an even less proportionate result?
What I would say to you about that is quite simply this. It is not a proportionate system, as Tessa fairly points out. However, the point about AV is that the result which it delivers, the way in which the vote is used by the individual voter, actually is far more involving within the political process than the mere tactical voting you can get.
Oh, all right. John Prescott, what is so unfair about a system that lets you rank the candidates that you prefer by 1, 2, 3, 4? This is my favourite, my second favourite, third. What would be wrong with that?
Well, we do use it in some of our party elections. I was elected as a deputy leader under that process. I think the important thing is to recognise you are now electing a government. And it's what the government do, which is the important thing about elections. You can have different forms of election processes. AV is clearly a step towards proportional representation, which is the obvious one against the first past the post. But it's about how you elect a government. And my argument is, and my view about it, is AV is inevitably a step towards coalition. And coalition doesn't give you the stability of government. More to the Democrats, more to the point, it doesn't deliver the promises you made to the electorate. It's fixed by a few people in the room, as we've seen with Clegg and Cameron.
We're going to do coalition later. I want to stick with the fairness issue, but just let me get this right, John Prescott. You're saying AV is good enough to elect the leader of the Labour Party, but not good enough to choose a government?
Well, I don't think it's a very fair way of choosing a government. I think on the election you've got an election between individuals of two leaders in that case, or in my case where it was for the deputy leadership, where that occurred. Government is the most important decision people can make, and trusting government, which is often brought up by people in AV, is about whether governments carry out what they promise.
All right. Charles Kennedy, did you agree with Chris Huhne, your Lib Dem colleague, that your coalition colleague, Saeed Vasi, the chairman of the Conservative Party, that she is, quote, waging a Goebbels-style campaign by arguing that AV would help the BNP. Do you agree with Mr. Huhne?
It wouldn't have been my choice of language. Chris is a bit more colourful, the way he expresses things. You know me over many years.
Chris Huhne is more colourful than Charles Kennedy.
Well, in his choice of language.
No.
in his choice of language.
No.
Well, you see, I'm winning under first past the post and AV here with my partners in crime. But
do you agree that she's waging a Goebbels-style campaign and that AV would help the BNP?
Well, let me take the point of substance as opposed to the colourful vocabulary. It won't help the BNP, and let's be quite clear, that's why the BNP are campaigning against AV. I've been in programmes with them over the last couple of weeks where they're more condemnatory of the system, thank goodness, than any of my mainstream party colleagues here.
What it would do is give those people whose first choice is the BNP much more influence in the outcome, because they would be able to vote for the BNP first, and then they'd have their second and third preferences. As Winston Churchill said, AV gives the greatest influence to the most worthless votes for the most worthless candidates.
Tessa Jowell, if AV helps the Greens, which a lot of your supporters say that's one of the reasons why they want it, if it helps the Greens, why doesn't it, by the same logic, help the BNP?
Look, I think the point is, AV is a change to alter the kind of politics we have.
But what's the answer to my question?
To put the voter first. It certainly doesn't help the BNP, which, as Charles said, is why the BNP are campaigning against it. The Greens maybe are a party which reaches out to other parties, and there is certainly in my own constituency movement between people who vote Labour and people who vote Green. But it forces us, AV forces us to be better politicians, reaching out beyond what might be defined as a core vote. The estimate was that the last election focused on 460,000 swing voters. We should be looking to involve the whole country in electing our government.
John Prescott, we are no longer a two-party system. which we were for most of the time after the Second World War. Indeed, we're a three-party system in England, Scotland and Wales were a four-party system. I don't know how many in Northern Ireland. Isn't it time we had a voting system that reflected, gave due weight to the smaller parties, whether it's the Greens or the BNP?
Yeah, I'm not against giving due weight to them, but they exercise far greater weight. For example, if you take Germany, which has got a kind of PR system, the Greens decided to change the Social Democratic Party and put the Christian Democrats in. That's halfway through. In Australia, where we've just had the election, the Labour Party had to negotiate with the Greens to get into government, and then two farmers about what they would do in their area. It gives them an extraordinary amount of influence, far beyond what they've been given by the electorate.
Nothing wrong with farmers, let's hastily add.
That's a very good argument, John, for proportional representation, but
Well,
we're not here to discuss that debate.
Charles, why are you so keen to have a referendum and to vote yes on this when your own leader said only last year that AV was, quote, a miserable little compromise?
Well, I remember tough on leaders, and I've been one myself. I remember Alex Salmond, the First Minister of Scotland, when the devolution proposals came out, and he described it as the blueprint for a pygmy parliament. It's been his First Minister for the last 4 years. What leaders choose to say in the heat of the moment is their problem. It's not about the leaders, this election.
So according
it's
to
about
you,
the
but
voters.
according to your leader, people should vote yes for a miserable little compromise on May the 5th.
That's for Nick to explain away. I'm just telling you...
You don't think it is a miserable little compromise?
No, I do not think it's a miserable little compromise. I think it's a decisive reforming step forward to improve politics.
But the majority didn't vote for Alex Salmond in Scotland, did they?
All right, let's stick with the
minorities
let's
again.
stick with the referendum on the voting system, and we'll do Scotland another day. Let's turn now to another main argument in the referendum. Which voting system will lead to better government? This has been another key part of the campaign. Michael Howard, the critics of AV have argued that it will lead to more coalitions. What's wrong with that?
The trouble with coalitions is that they undermine accountability. If you have a one-party government, which you normally get under first past the post, though as we see at the moment, not always, then that government is accountable to the electorate for the promises it makes. If it breaks those promises, the electorate can kick them out. Under coalitions, then any party can say to the electorate, yes, it's perfectly true we made that promise to you, but we weren't able to keep it because we had to form a coalition. And that coalition meant that we had to compromise and we couldn't keep our promises to you. So government becomes less accountable to the electorate. And in my view, accountability is at the very heart of democracy.
But your party ran an election broadcast in the campaign 2010 with a noose on the screen, obviously very sophisticated to represent a hung parliament. And it said that if Britain got a hung parliament and a coalition government, it would lead to, quote, indecision and weak government, a dip in confidence, a run on the pound, disastrous heights in interest rates, and paralyze the country. None of that turned out to be true.
I think the present coalition partners in the present coalition are making a Herculean attempt successfully to overcome all those difficulties.
So what you told us was wrong. Interest rates haven't moved. The pound has not dipped. I don't think you would say we have an indecisive and weak government.
Those are all risks of coalition governments, but the real argument is that coalition governments blur accountability. The electorate should be able to hold a party accountable for the promises it makes. It can do that with single-party government. It can't under coalition.
What do you say to that?
That AV will give rise to more coalition government is nonsense. And John Curtis has made, yes, and John Curtis, who's a very eminent election expert, has looked at this very closely. And in the last 30 years, had AV been applied in every general election, only the 2010 election would have turned out as a coalition.
It's nonsense, John Prescott.
What, that it leads to coalitions? Well, just look in Australia, it's coalition. In the countries where they've got it, there's only 3 of them got it, and they have coalitions. In Belgium, they can't even get a government together because of the agreements, trying to find an agreement with a coalition. Look, the essential thing to me is how we elect government is what you promise. My election card, told about the jobs.
I wondered when that was going to make an appearance.
I tell you that.
Late in the programme, I would have thought.
But then in the election, I come and I say, did we deliver on the jobs? Did we deliver on the... Yes, and the people can make a choice. If you put the one out for the Liberals now, it would have been health is safe in our hands, will not increase the student finances. That was the pledges they had. What can they do now? You've got Mr Cameron and Mr Clegg going around the country to try and convince people that the coalition's policy